historically, we must place this matter in context. Remember there was 2022 Act. Then there was an interpretation of the Supreme Court as to the provision, especially on this issue of electronic transmission. The Supreme Court was of the view that even though it was in a guideline, a guideline cannot in any way supersede the statutory provision that didn't mention IREF, didn't mention electronic transmission. And so for that purpose, immediately they were sworn in. I mean, the politicians, the members of the National Assembly started to take a second look in order to fill the gap, because there was a gap. There was no statutory mention of those two issues that would have sorted out the electoral dispute problem in court. So they say, what do we do? Collated information from the civil society, Nigerian stakeholders all made an input, and they were saying, look, let's go electronic in terms of transmission, because the problem has always been between the polling unit and the collection center. Things change. And how do we ensure transparency? How do we ensure participatory governance, that the people will see the result as they have already cast it at the polling unit? So eventually they arrive at there is going to be electronic transmission in the law. IREF must be mentioned. But again, when eventually the law has emerged, what is the provision? The Senate said, look, we must take into cognizance issue of operational difficulties. It is called force majeure in contract, unexpected. And that if you don't, then you are forgetting what happened in 2023, where issue of glitch was mentioned. So that the operational realities must be taken into consideration. We're all happy to go with electronic transmission, but we must also look at issue of infrastructural constraints, that if it does occur, then there must be a fallback option. That is where Nigerians say, look, let's go electronic all the way. Because issue of human interference is what has actually not helped Nigeria. So let's have electronic determine all that. So that is the argument. But eventually, we met halfway. Meeting halfway means that those two things that were not in the statute is now in the statute. But the only problem is that in case there is what they call communication failure, which I still feel that should be defined properly, then there will be a fallback option of EC8 form. But in any case, even the electronic transmission, the IREF does not collate. IREF does not collate. Everything still has to be done manually. But the only thing that happens is in case there is discrepancy between what you are doing manually and what is already electronically recorded, you now prefer that, because that is done immediately election was, So that's been the issue. So for me, we now have to look at INEC. We have to look at the judiciary, because these are the institutions now that can give some level of clarification to any ambiguity whatsoever that people are now pointing out. So my thinking is, issue of deficiency of trust, with the institution is actually what made Nigerians to be agitating, that we don't want it with any proviso, because the exception has always been the rule in Nigeria. So why don't we leave out exception and go for the real thing? But as I said earlier, the senators are saying, the members of the House are saying, we must also recognize issue of infrastructural constraints.